Nobody knew the night nurse was a sniper until armed insurgents broke into the field hospital. And here's the question that hurts: how many times have you walked past someone who looks ordinary, never guessing they're carrying a war inside their ribs? It's 2:47 a.m. in West Virginia, rain hammering the canvas walls of Field Hospital Liberty. The coffee's gone cold. Monitors beep like metronomes for bad news. A young doctor pretends he isn't scared. A nurse jokes to keep her hands from shaking. Erin Mercer checks an IV drip with steady fingers, but her eyes keep measuring the dark gaps beyond the floodlights. Then the perimeter alarm dies mid-scream. Stay with me, because this isn't just a firefight story. It's about pressure oaths and the moment a healer becomes the last line of defense. If you're watching, hit like and tell me where you're listening from. The alarm died mid-scream, and for a beat, the whole hospital seemed to hold its breath, listening for the sound that should have followed. Only rain answered, hard and steady drumming on canvas and plastic like fingers tapping a table in impatience. Field Hospital Liberty sat in a clearing outside Elkins, West Virginia, where the Monongahela National Forest thickened into black walls of pine and wet rock. It was not a building so much as a stitched-together promise. Reinforced tents anchored by sandbags, prefab corridors bolted to pallets, a generator shed that smelled of diesel and stubbornness. In daylight, it looked temporary, almost fragile. At night, under floodlights and storm cloud, it looked like a ship that had lost the ocean and found itself stranded on a mountain. Inside, the air carried antiseptic damp wool and the sour edge of stale coffee. The kind brewed too strong on purpose because weak coffee was an admission that you had time to taste it. Monitors beeped in patient little rhythms. Vent fans hissed. Somewhere down the corridor, a bag valve mask squeaked with each squeeze, a tired rubber lung doing its best impression of mercy. Erin Mercer moved through it all like she belonged to the machinery. She was 41, maybe 42, depending on how you counted years like this with gray, threading her dark hair that she pulled into a tight bun and forgot about. Her scrubs hung loose on her, practical and unremarkable. No jewelry, no perfume, no small talk. A penlight in one pocket, trauma shears in the other, and the calm that made people either trust her instantly or avoid her altogether. She checked the IV rack, touched each line with 2 fingers to feel vibration read each drip chamber without leaning too close. The patient in bed 3 slept with his mouth open, one hand curled like a child's. His pulse ox glowed a steady number. Erin adjusted the flow by a hair, then paused to listen. Not to the machines, to the building. Canvas shifted in the wind. A seam creaked. The generator's drone deepened and rose again like an animal rolling over in its sleep. Erin's eyes drifted toward the narrow window flap at the end of the corridor where rain slapped the plastic. Beyond that was darkness, floodlights, and the fence line that kept Liberty from becoming just another story on the morning radio. Behind her, a chair squealed softly as someone leaned back on 2 legs. The sound was casual, almost lazy, and it annoyed Erin in a way she did not show on her face. Dr. Nolan Pierce sat at the nurse's station with a tablet in his hands, scrolling inventory logs like he was reading sports scores. He was late 20s, early 30s, brilliant on paper, sharp in the operating bay, and still naive enough to believe talent made you immune to consequences. His white coat was folded over the back of the chair because he liked how it looked when it swung. His hair was perfectly wrong for a place that smelled like blood. His hands were clean in a way that meant he had not yet been forced to choose between sanitation and speed. He glanced up without lifting his head. "Mercer, you're hovering again." Erin did not turn. She finished adjusting the drip. "Monitoring isn't hovering." Nolan snorted and twirled a pen between his fingers. "Bed 3 is stable. Go take a break. You're making the residents nervous." "There are no residents here," Erin said. "That's my point." Erin finally looked at him. Her eyes were a pale gray that made people think of winter windows. Not cold exactly, more like tired of being surprised. "The barometric pressure is dropping." He rolled his eyes toward the ceiling as if the weather itself was trying too hard. It's rain. Not an airstrike. The storm's masking sound, Aaron said. You treat this place like a bunker instead of a hospital. Nolan leaned forward, elbows on the desk. It's been quiet for weeks. Even the militias hate this weather. Aaron's gaze drifted back to the window flap. She did not argue. Arguing was for people who believed the right sentence could make a bad world behave. Nolan watched her for a moment, then softened his voice like he was offering a peace treaty. You okay, Aaron? She did not answer the question. She picked up a clipboard, checked vitals, made a note in neat block letters, and set it back down. When she spoke again, her tone was flat and low. We're low on saline. Nolan blinked. We're always low on saline. Then order more. He gave a small laugh, the kind that sounded like it belonged at a conference. You know I can't magic supplies out of thin air. Aaron's eyes flicked to his hands, to the clean fingernails, to the pen spinning. No, you can't. That was the end of it. Nolan returned to his tablet, annoyance fading into the easy arrogance of someone who believed the world would keep giving him chances. Aaron moved on her shoes, whispering on the linoleum. Soft soles. Quiet steps. A preference, she told herself, was about patient comfort, not about moving without being heard. At the far end of the corridor, Jenna Hart was wrestling with a box of gauze that refused to open along the perforation. She had to use her teeth. When she finally tore it, she made a triumphant sound and held the gauze up like a prize. Victory, Jenna said. Aaron's mouth did not smile, but something in her eyes shifted, almost imperceptible. Jenna caught it anyway because Jenna caught everything. That was her talent. She was a traveling nurse from Ohio who had come down to West Virginia after the floods, after the road ambushes, after the state started calling in the guard and the feds, and anyone with a pulse and a license. Jenna had bright hair pulled into a ponytail, freckles, and the kind of voice that tried to fill silence before silence could fill her. You're always creeping around, Jenna said in a whisper that was not actually quiet. It's like you want to scare people. I don't want anything, Aaron replied. Jenna leaned closer. You know what I want. Aaron waited. Jenna's eyes lit up. I want actual sleep. Like in a bed. Like without boots still on. Like without dreaming about the sound of helicopters. Also, I want the vending machine to stop eating my money. The vending machine is a predator, Aaron said. Jenna laughed, surprised. Oh my God, you do have jokes. Aaron took a roll of tape from the supply cart and handed it to her. Stop using your teeth. Infection control. Yes, ma'am. Jenna saluted with the tape, then lowered her voice like she was about to confess a crime. Did you hear we're getting a transfer tonight? Aaron did not move, but her attention sharpened. Who told you that? Jenna looked offended. I have ears. Also, Sergeant Mills thinks I'm cute, so he tells me things. Aaron's eyes slid toward the nurse's station. Nolan was still absorbed in his tablet. His shoulders were tense in a way he thought no one could see. Aaron could see it. She could see tension the way some people saw colors. What kind of transfer, Aaron asked. Jenna's excitement tried to climb into her voice, and Aaron's calm smothered it. Jenna adjusted anyway. Big deal. State Department, Special Envoy. He got caught near Route 19 when a convoy hit an IED. They're bringing him here because it's the closest facility that can keep him alive. Aaron's fingers tightened on the tape dispenser. Not enough to crack plastic. Enough to leave a faint white imprint in her skin that would fade in seconds. Jenna lowered her voice further. Major Holloway is bringing him in personally. The name landed in the air like a weight. Aaron set the tape dispenser down carefully when Jenna glanced at her watch. They said within the hour. Maybe less. The storm's making roads a mess, but those guys drive like they're mad at the laws of physics. Aaron nodded once. Stay out of the trauma bay. Jenna's brows knit. Why that's where all the action is. Aaron's gaze moved to Jenna's hands. They were small, bare, trembling just a little. Because it will be loud. Jenna tried to make a face like Aaron was being dramatic. The face didn't hold. You think something's wrong. Erin picked up a blood pressure cuff and checked the next bed. Her voice stayed even. Something is always wrong. Jenna watched her for a moment, then forced brightness back into her posture. Okay, fine. I'll be your boring little supply room goblin. But I'm still asking Sergeant Mills to help me with the vending machine. If it eats my money again, I'm declaring war. Erin did not answer. Jenna moved off down the corridor, humming something under her breath that might have been a pop song or might have been a prayer. Erin walked to the window flap at the end of the hall and lifted it just enough to look out without letting rain whip in. Cold air cut across her face. The floodlights threw hard shadows on the mud. The perimeter fence sat 200 yards out, wire and posts shining wet. Beyond it, trees stood thick and dark, their branches heavy with water. The guard tower on the rise was a smear in fog. Erin's eyes traced lines the way Nolan traced charts. She measured distance without thinking about it as naturally as breathing. Fence to tower. Tower to drainage ditch. Ditch to tree line. The storm made everything quieter and louder at the same time. She let the flap fall. Behind her, Nolan called, "Hey, you actually know this Major Holloway?" Erin turned slowly. No. Nolan raised a brow. Jenna said his name and you went still. Erin's face remained blank. I don't like surprises. We live in a surprise, Nolan said, gesturing vaguely around the corridor. This place was a high school gym last month. Now it's a hospital. The state calls it humanitarian response. My dad calls it politics. I call it a bad dream. Erin studied him. There was fatigue behind his arrogance and fear behind his fatigue. Nolan was not a bad man. He was a young man holding an adult job in a world that punished youth. You should eat, Erin said. He blinked, thrown off. What? You're shaking, she said. Your hands. Eat something. Nolan looked down at his fingers as if they had betrayed him. I'm fine. Erin did not argue. She walked past him into the supply corridor where boxes were stacked higher than shoulder level and the air smelled like cardboard and iodine. She moved without hurry, but her mind was already arranging the world into angles and options. 6 months at Liberty had taught her the habits of the place. Which doors stuck in humidity, which corners creaked, which Marines smoked where when they thought no one was watching. At the end of the supply corridor was a door with a keypad. A simple gray slab with a sticker that read, "Ventilator parts do not touch." Most people never looked at it twice. Erin looked at it every night. She entered a code with 2 fingers. The light blinked green. She did not open the door. She rested her palm against the metal and felt the faint vibration on the other side, the silent weight of what waited within. She removed her hand. On the shelf beside the door was a clipboard of maintenance checks. Erin flipped it open and scanned the lines. Generator fuel, sterile packs, blood bank lock, camera feeds. She made a mark, then closed it. A sound came from the nurse's station faint through the corridor. Nolan was speaking into a radio handset with forced cheer. "Liberty, this is Pierce. I hear you. Copy. Yes, we have capacity." He paused, listened, and his voice tightened. "How bad is he?" Erin waited still and silent. Nolan's face appeared at the corridor entrance. He looked like he had swallowed a stone. "They're bringing in a VIP," he said. Erin's eyes did not change. "I heard." Nolan swallowed again. "He's in rough shape. Penetrating wound. Possibly abdominal. Trauma, Bay 1, Erin said automatically. "Yes," Nolan replied. "And Major Holloway is coming with them plus security. They want us ready." Erin nodded. "Then get ready." Nolan held her gaze. "You ever worked with the guard before? Like really worked with them?" Erin's answer came a half-second too fast. "No." Nolan's mouth tightened like he had expected a different lie. He glanced down the corridor at the keypad door, then back at Erin. "You're strange," he said, trying to make it sound like a joke. In a good way. In a terrifying way. Erin stepped around him. "Open the blood fridge." Check expiration dates. Confirm O-negative inventory. Nolan blinked again, irritated. Yes, ma'am. Aaron returned to the main corridor. Jenna was back near the crash cart, restocking syringes. She looked up at Aaron and tried to read her face like Aaron's face was a weather report. You okay, Jenna asked. Aaron's eyes flicked to the ceiling where a seam in the canvas fluttered with a gust. You should keep your voice down. Jenna's smile faltered while Aaron reached for the crash cart handle and checked the latch. Because fear travels. Jenna swallowed. Aaron, that's creepy. Aaron did not soften it. It's true. Jenna's hands went to her own arms, rubbing as if she could warm herself from the inside. I hate nights like this. Aaron looked at Jenna, then really looked, and her voice lowered. Then, don't make noise. A Marine passed by the corridor entrance, dripping rainwater onto the floor. He was young, maybe 19, with a rifle slung across his chest and wet hair plastered to his forehead. He glanced at Aaron and nodded. Aaron nodded back. How's it out there? Nolan called from behind the station. The Marine shrugged. Visibility sucks. Fog's thick. The tower's basically blind. Aaron's jaw tightened. The Marine kept walking. His boots squeaked on the floor. Aaron listened until the squeaks faded. Nolan rubbed his eyes, then put on a voice that tried to sound in control. Okay, trauma team, listen up. We're getting a protected transfer. All hands, Jenna, you're on suction. Aaron, you're on fluids and vitals. I want to line in within 30 seconds of arrival. Jenna gave a shaky thumbs up. Got it. Aaron said nothing. She moved to the triage bay and began laying out what she needed, not in a frantic scatter, but in clean, deliberate order. Saline bags in a row. Tubing, coiled and ready. Tourniquets, chest seals, needles for decompression. She checked the defib pads, then the battery on the portable monitor. The storm hit the tent walls harder, as if it had heard its name and wanted attention. Nolan tried to fill the noise. You know, he said to no one in particular, I applied for a fellowship at Johns Hopkins. Trauma surgery, city stuff, sharp knives, bright lights, real hospitals. And then my mother called crying because the floods took our basement and the state asked for volunteers. So here I am. Jenna glanced at him. That's nice. Nolan exhaled, annoyed at himself. I'm just talking. It helps. Aaron slid a needle into a tray and checked its seal. Talking doesn't change blood loss. Nolan stared at her, then laughed once short. God, you're brutal. Aaron did not deny it. The first time Aaron had worn scrubs, she had thought they might feel like a costume. Something soft and harmless. Something that meant she belonged to a different world. They did not. Cloth was cloth. It soaked up blood the same way any fabric did. The difference was what people assumed when they saw it. Scrubs meant healer. Scrubs meant safety. Aaron had learned to live inside that assumption. She moved down the bay, checking each bed, each patient's breathing, each pulse. Some were guardsmen with wounds that had names and charts. Some were locals with injuries that did not. A crushed hand from a fallen tree. A child with dehydration. A man with an infected cut that had started as a small thing and turned into a bigger thing because the roads were broken and pride was stubborn. Aaron adjusted a blanket over an older woman's shoulders. The woman stirred and looked up at her eyes, watery and confused. Am I going to be okay? The woman whispered. Aaron's voice was gentle, the gentlest thing about her. You're warm. Your heart is steady. You're here, yes. The woman's eyes closed again. Aaron's hand lingered for half a second, then withdrew. At the far end of the bay, a medic was cleaning a stretcher, wiping away blood with the numb efficiency of repetition. The smell rose sharp and metallic, and Aaron's mind flashed a picture she did not invite. Sand. Heat. A distant ridgeline. A scope's crosshair hovering over a doorway. The sight of a child's sandal in the dust. Aaron's fingers curled, then relaxed. She focused on the present, on the sting of disinfectant in her nose, on the sound of rain. The past was a place you could get lost in if you let it. Nolan's voice cut across the bay. Aaron, Holloway is supposed to arrive with the convoy. You've met him, right? Like in briefings or something. Aaron kept her eyes on the monitor. No. Jenna shot Nolan a look. Dude, stop interrogating her. Nolan raised his hands. I'm not. He has a reputation. What kind? Jenna asked. Hard, Nolan said. By the book. The kind of guy who can smell a lie. Aaron's fingers pressed down on the IV bag, testing its firmness. Then don't lie. Nolan's mouth tightened. He stared at Aaron for a moment as if he wanted to say something more, something truer. He did not. He turned away and checked the blood fridge again, rattling the lock like he needed to hear it click. Aaron walked back toward the nurse's station. The corridor seemed longer now, not in distance but in feeling. The red exit signs cast faint color on the wet floor. She passed the break room where a television played with the sound off a weather map flickering blues and greens. Someone had taped a handwritten note to the wall, "We are still here." Aaron stopped at the keypad door again. Her hand hovered over the metal. She thought of the rifle inside, of the weight of it, of what it meant to use it again. She thought of her hands, how they could stabilize an airway or end a life depending on what they held. She thought of the oath Nolan had spoken once half-joking when he first arrived. Do no harm. Aaron had not laughed then either. Harm was not always a choice you made. Sometimes it was a fact you survived. She dropped her hand. Footsteps approached from the main entrance corridor, heavier than Jenna's, more disciplined than Nolan's. Aaron turned. Major Grant Holloway entered the ward with 2 soldiers behind him, rainwater streaming off his jacket. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked carved from impatience. A cut along his temple had bled into his eyebrow. His eyes swept the corridor like he was counting exits, threats, and time. When his gaze landed on Aaron, it did not slide away. It paused, a fraction of a second too long. Aaron felt it like a change in air pressure. Holloway's jaw worked once, like he was chewing a thought. Then he looked past her and spoke to Nolan, who had rushed forward. Dr. Pierce, we have a protected transfer inbound. Prep your trauma bay. Nolan nodded quickly. We're ready, sir. Holloway's eyes flicked back to Aaron as if confirming something he could not quite name. Aaron kept her face empty, her posture neutral, hands at her sides. A nurse waiting for orders, a woman with no past. Holloway turned away. Where's your comms? Front desk, Nolan said, pointing. Holloway walked toward the radio station, grabbed the handset, and listened. Static. He adjusted a dial, listened again. More static. His mouth tightened. Aaron watched him without appearing to watch. Holloway moved like someone used to weight on his back. Responsibility, guilt, both. He pressed the mic button. Liberty Base, this is Major Holloway. Convoy status. Static answered him thick and ugly. Jenna swallowed hard. That's not normal. Nolan's voice lowered. The storm. Holloway did not look at them. The storm doesn't jam a radio. Aaron felt the hair on her arms lift under her sleeves. Holloway set the handset down slowly. Lock down the entrances. Keep your staff inside. Nolan blinked. Sir, we're a hospital. Holloway's eyes cut to him. Then act like one that wants to stay standing. A distant sound carried through the canvas walls. Not thunder, not rain. Something lower, mechanical, then gone. Aaron's eyes moved to the corridor where the camera monitor hung. The feed flickered. One screen went black, another filled with snow. Aaron's pulse did not spike. It narrowed. The world sharpened to details. The way the emergency lights hummed. The way Nolan's fingers trembled near the blood fridge key. The way Jenna's breathing turned shallow. Holloway lifted the radio handset again, jaw set, and held the mic button down like willpower could force a signal through a storm. The speaker crackled once, then a voice broke through, strained and urgent. Liberty Base, this is Convoy 2, taking heavy fire. The voice came through the radio in chopped bursts, fighting static like it was a living thing. Behind it, Aaron could hear wind and shouting, the hollow rattle of gunfire that sounded too close to be comforting. Repeat, the voice strained. Taking heavy fire. We are pushing the gate. Multiple wounded. Get the bay ready. Major Grant Holloway's thumb stayed pressed to the mic as if he could physically hold the signal in place. Convoy 2, this is Holloway. Identify threat. Static swallowed the answer, then spit out fragments. Ambush, not locals, optics, suppressors, they're moving with us. Holloway's eyes snapped up, hard and alert. Lock the perimeter doors, he ordered, voice carrying down the corridor. All non-essential staff to the interior. Nolan looked like he wanted to argue. He opened his mouth, then shut it again when a distant crack rolled through the storm, sharper than thunder. The sound hit the canvas walls and died, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. Jenna's hands hovered over the crash cart. That was a shot. Aaron's gaze went to the camera monitor. Another feed flickered, then died. A third became crawling snow. "They're cutting your eyes," Aaron said quietly. Nolan glanced at her, startled. "What?" Aaron did not repeat herself. She moved to the nurse's station and lifted the desk phone. Dead tone, she looked at Holloway. Power and comms are being shaped, not lost. Holloway's jaw flexed. "Doctor," he said to Nolan, "triage bay now. Clear a secure room. The VIP stays breathing." Nolan nodded too fast. "Yes, sir. Jenna suction and airway. Aaron fluids and vitals. I want large bore access now." Aaron was already walking, trauma kit in hand. She did not run. Running in tight spaces made noise, and noise made you predictable. Her shoes whispered across the linoleum as she entered Trauma Bay 1. The bay was bright in a tired way, lit by overhead strips that buzzed slightly at the edges, as if the electricity itself was anxious. Stainless tables gleamed. Cabinets sat locked and orderly. It looked like control, and it was. The radio crackled again. "Liberty, Convoy 2. We are through the outer gate. We are taking fire from the tree line. They are following." Holloway's voice came back cold and measured. "Do not stop. Drive straight into the bay. We will cover the doors." Aaron's eyes moved to the bay entrance, then to the side corridors, then up to the ceiling seams where prefab panels met. Her mind mapped routes and angles without asking permission. She set out a saline bag, coiled the tubing, and checked the needle seals. Nolan's hands were shaking as he snapped on gloves. "You're fine," Jenna whispered to him, trying to make it true. Nolan swallowed. "I'm fine." Jenna's eyes flicked to Aaron. Aaron's face gave away nothing. That made Jenna's breathing faster, not slower. Outside, engines roared, then a squeal of tires on wet gravel, then the hard slam of vehicle doors. Voices rose in the storm. Boots hit the ground. The bay doors burst inward, and cold air knifed through the room, carrying rain mud and the metallic tang of blood. Two soldiers dragged in a stretcher, first their uniforms soaked, black faces smeared with grime. A third soldier stumbled behind them, one hand pressed to his shoulder, fingers slick and red. Major Holloway stormed in, last rifle up, scanning corners, even as water ran off his hair and into his eyes. He looked like he had been cut out of the storm and dropped into the bay. "Close it," he barked. "Now." The bay doors slammed shut with a bang that made everyone flinch. On the first stretcher lay a man in a torn suit, his tie missing, his shirt soaked through at the abdomen. Special Envoy Miles Stanton. His skin was pale under the harsh light, lips parted, breath shallow and fast. His hands twitched once, then went still. On the second stretcher, a corporal's leg was a ruin of shredded fabric and bone. The smell hit like a wall-wet earth and copper, and something burned. Nolan stepped in, voice rising to cover fear with authority. "Envoy first, Jenna suction, Aaron line and fluids. Someone get me O negative." "Blood fridge," Aaron said, already moving. Nolan glanced at her, then back to Stanton. "He's hypotensive." He snapped fingers, pressing into the wound. Blood welled and spilled between his knuckles. "Pressure, keep pressure." "Where's the blood bank key?" Aaron was there at his elbow, a saline bag already spiked. She slapped it into Nolan's hand. "He's tensioning. she said, eyes on Stanton's chest. Nolan's mouth opened. I know. His fingers fumbled for a needle. The arrogance in his face had been replaced by something raw. Aaron did not correct him. She watched the bay doors, watched Holloway and his soldiers take positions, watched the way the lights above flickered once, twice like eyelids fighting sleep. Holloway pressed his shoulder mic. Command, this is Holloway. We have the package at Liberty. Request immediate air support. Only static answered. Holloway tried again, voice sharper. Command, respond. Static. He slammed his fist against a cabinet. The sound echoed off metal. They are jamming us. Nolan looked up pale. Major, we're a medical facility. Holloway's gaze cut to him. That does not matter. He nodded toward Stanton. Doctor, keep him alive. That man carries the ceasefire authentication key. Nolan stared. A key. It is not a metaphor. Holloway's eyes moved, checking the room, checking faces, checking exits. If he is taken, the truce collapses. 3 counties light up by morning. Jenna swallowed hard. Who would do that? Holloway's voice stayed level. Men who get paid to make peace inconvenient. Aaron felt Holloway's eyes on her again briefly, like a finger pressing on a bruise. She did not look back. A distant boom rolled through the ground. The overhead lights shivered. Then everything went dark. The buzz of fluorescence died. Monitors blinked off. For half a second, the bay became a black mouth. Screams rose from the corridor. Emergency strips along the baseboards flickered on, bathing the bay in a dim red glow that turned every face into something haunted. Generator down, someone shouted from outside the bay. They hit the fuel shed. Nolan's voice cracked. I need light. Headlamps, Aaron said, already pulling one from the trauma kit and snapping it on. The beam cut a narrow tunnel through red gloom. Holloway's rifle stayed up. How many hostiles, he demanded, speaking to the soldiers who had come in with him. One of them shook his head, breath ragged. We saw movement in the tree line. Optics. They were disciplined. Not militia. They were walking us. Holloway's jaw tightened. He looked at the bay entrance at the corridor beyond it. They are coming inside. Nolan's hands pressed harder on Stanton's wound. This is insane. Aaron's headlamp beam slid across the camera monitor on the wall. It was dead now. The screen showed nothing but black glass reflecting red light and fearful faces. They blinded you, Aaron murmured again, more to herself. Jenna's voice trembled. Aaron, what do we do? Aaron turned her head just enough to look at Jenna. You listen. Okay. Do not go to the front, Aaron said. Go to the rear supply room. Lock the door. Do not open it unless you hear my voice. Exactly my voice. Jenna blinked rapidly like she was trying to wake up. Aaron, they need us. Aaron's hand closed gently but firmly around Jenna's wrist. Her grip was not cruel. It was final. Go. Jenna's eyes flashed with something like anger, then fear swallowed it. She nodded once and backed away, then turned and ran, her shoes squeaking on wet floor. Nolan glanced after her. Where did you send her? Somewhere she can breathe, Aaron said. Nolan's mouth tightened, then he jerked his focus back to Stanton. He found the needle again, hands shaking. Aaron leaned in close, voice low and calm, cutting through the storm inside the bay. Angle here, she said. You want air out, not blood in. Nolan's eyes snapped to hers. For a second, he looked like he wanted to argue. Then he did it the way she said. A hiss escaped. Stanton's chest eased slightly under Nolan's palm. Nolan's face changed just a fraction. He looked at Aaron like she had pulled him back from a cliff. Holloway's voice rose from the bay doors. Secure the hallway. No one wanders. A soldier answered, yes, sir. Then glass shattered somewhere to the right in the direction of the east corridor. A thud followed, heavy and final, like a body hitting the floor. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then gunfire erupted, sharp bursts that sounded muffled, controlled. Someone screamed high and brief, cut off. Holloway snapped his rifle toward the corridor. Contact right. Nolan flinched, then forced his hands to keep working. Stay on the wound, he hissed at himself. Stay on the wound. Aaron's headlamp beam swept the bay doors, then the corridor seams, then the ceiling. She listened, not to the shots, to the spacing between them, to the pauses, to the way footsteps moved in groups. These were not panicked men firing into darkness. These were men doing a job. Holloway leaned into the hallway and fired controlled bursts. Muzzle flash lit his face in harsh white slices. He shouted to his soldiers, "Suppress, suppress. Do not let them stack on the bay." A soldier yelled back, "We're outnumbered." Holloway's answer was clipped. "Then make every round count." In the red light, Nolan's gloves shone wet. He looked up, face slick with sweat, eyes wide. "Major," he said, voice thin, "if they breach this room, I can't keep him alive." Holloway glanced at Stanton, then at Nolan. "Then they do not breach." That was the kind of statement that sounded like faith until you saw the numbers. Aaron moved to the bay entrance, keeping close to the wall, using shadow even in red light. She peered into the corridor. Smoke hung low, a smear of gray in the darkness. The prefab hallway had already been chewed by rounds. Holes dotted the thin walls. Medical posters fluttered torn. The air smelled of cordite and melted plastic. A soldier lay on the floor near the junction, motionless, his helmet tilted at an angle that made Aaron's stomach tighten. A second soldier dragged him back by the vest, grunting, leaving a wet trail. Holloway was behind a pillar, firing and shifting, trying to keep the enemy's heads down with too few men. Aaron's eyes flicked down the east corridor, where the glass had shattered. The window there opened to the drainage ditch that ran beside the facility, a cut in the ground that filled with storm water and mud. A perfect approach. Low. Concealed. Close enough to throw a man into the building before anyone could see him. She looked back at Holloway. "They came through the east," she said. Holloway's eyes cut to her. Even in the chaos, he registered her tone. Not fear, analysis. "How do you know?" he snapped. Aaron did not raise her voice. "Because the glass broke there. Because your men are firing there. Because they want the VIP and the bay as the shortest route." Holloway's jaw flexed. "Who are you, Nurse Mercer?" Aaron did not answer. A round slapped the pillar near Holloway's head, spitting concrete dust. Holloway ducked, cursed, and returned fire. Aaron's headlamp beam slid to a shadow near the corridor ceiling. A small dark shape tucked near a seam. She narrowed her eyes. A camera. No, not a camera. Something else. A small box with an antenna blinking faintly attached where a maintenance tech would never look. A jammer node, cheap and effective, feeding the fog and storm with dead air. Aaron's mouth went dry. These men had prep time, intelligence, maps. This hospital was not a random target. A soldier shouted, "They're pushing." Holloway yelled back, "Holdy." A new sound rose over the gunfire, deeper rolling like furniture being shoved. The enemy was moving cover forward, inching closer, using the corridor's thin walls and scattered equipment as stepping stones. Nolan's voice came from behind Aaron, strained. "Aaron, blood. I need blood." Aaron turned, grabbed 2 units from the cooler, and set them in Nolan's hands. Nolan hung them with fingers that fumbled but did not drop. His headlamp beam shook as he worked. Aaron watched the way Nolan's shoulders hunched, the way he tried to make himself smaller against noise. She recognized it. Not from hospitals. From places where bullets found you if you stood wrong. Another crack. Another scream. The sound of boots pounding closer. Holloway's voice turned into a growl. "Fall back to the lobby threshold. Do not give them the bay." His remaining soldiers shifted, dragging the wounded, leaving slick red smears across the floor. Aaron stepped back into the bay, keeping her head low, eyes on the door, mind counting. How many shooters? How many angles? How many seconds? Nolan's voice broke. "Major, we can't fight them in here." Holloway did not look away from the corridor. "Then we die in here." Aaron felt something inside her tighten, not fear. Something older, sharper. She looked at Stanton. The envoy's eyes fluttered once unfocused, then closed. His mouth formed a sound that might have been a word. Nolan pressed fingers to Stanton's neck and nodded as if reassuring himself the pulse was still there. Aaron's headlamp beam slid across the bay's supply shelves, across sterile packs, across the white label on the cabinet that held nothing useful for gunmen. A loud thump hit the bay doors from the corridor side, followed by the scrape of metal against metal. The enemy was testing the threshold. Holloway fired twice. The thump stopped, then shifted to the side, adapting. Aaron took one step toward the supply corridor. Nolan saw her movement. "Aaron, where are you going?" Aaron did not answer him directly. She leaned in close, voice low enough that only Nolan could hear it. "Keep pressure. Keep him breathing. Do not let them separate you from him." Nolan's eyes widened. "Aaron, what are you doing?" Aaron's gaze held his for a beat, steady as a pulse on a monitor. "I'm fixing a problem." Holloway heard something in her tone and turned his head just enough to watch her. His eyes narrowed, recognition or suspicion sharpening. Aaron moved through the bay and into the corridor, staying tight to the wall headlamp off, now letting the red strips do the work. She slipped past a stack of supply crates and into the side passage where the keypad door waited. Gunfire hammered the main hall behind her. The building shuddered with each burst, thin walls protesting every impact. Aaron reached the door labeled "Ventilator parts do not touch." Her fingers hovered over the keypad. Then she began to type. Aaron's fingers hovered over the keypad, then began to type with the same calm she used when counting heartbeats. The corridor shook with gunfire behind her, the thin walls complaining with every impact, but her hands did not rush. Each press was deliberate. Each tone from the pad was swallowed by the storm and the chaos. Green light. Click. She slipped inside and pulled the door shut without letting it latch loudly. For a moment, the sound changed. The war became muffled, distant, as if someone had shoved cotton in the world's ears. The supply closet smelled like sterile gauze plastic and the faint bite of metal that did not belong in a hospital. Aaron exhaled through her nose and let her eyes adjust. Boxes of saline were stacked along one wall. Sterile packs and suture kits sat in neat rows. A mop bucket leaned in a corner like a tired guard. And behind the stacks, half hidden by a draped tarp, sat a hard case, the color of wet asphalt. "Ventilator parts," the label claimed. Aaron crouched, moved the tarp aside, and ran her fingertips over the case's scuffed latches. The motion was almost gentle, like she was waking something that preferred to sleep. Outside the closet, a scream cut short. Aaron flipped the latches. The case opened with a soft sigh of foam and hinges. Inside, nestled in fitted black padding, were pieces of a rifle that looked wrong in this setting. Too clean, too purposeful. A long barrel separated from its receiver. A scope that carried its own weight in glass and steel. A bolt that felt like it belonged in machinery built to punch holes in problems rather than solve them. Alongside it, a compact pistol sat with a suppressor beside it, and magazines lined like bricks. Aaron did not stare. She did not savor. She simply began. Barrel, receiver, bolt, scope mount. Her hands moved without hesitation, but not with hurry either. The kind of speed that came from repetition, not adrenaline. She assembled the rifle until it was whole again, then paused and set it back in the case. Not yet. The corridors of Field Hospital Liberty were tight. Corners came fast. Sightlines were short. A long gun like this was a declaration, and declarations got answered. Aaron reached for the pistol instead. She threaded the suppressor onto the barrel, checked the chamber, and slid in a fresh magazine. The click was quiet, but it echoed inside her chest anyway. She peeled off her scrub top in one motion and folded it without thinking, then set it on a shelf like it was still part of her job. Underneath was a black thermal shirt that hugged her arms and torso, the fabric worn thin at the elbows. She grabbed a roll of duct tape from a supply bin, tore off strips with her teeth, and taped 2 spare magazines high against her thigh where they would not rattle. Her fingers paused on the tape for half a beat. Then she finished. Clean, tight, functional. She stepped toward a dented metal cabinet and caught her own reflection in its dull surface. The red emergency glow made her cheekbones look sharper, Her eyes did not look tired anymore. They looked awake in a way that scared people when they noticed it. Erin lowered her gaze, slid the pistol into a waistband holster and took one slow breath. Inhale, exhale. The nurse did not disappear. The nurse simply moved aside. Erin cracked the closet door and listened. Gunfire in the main corridor. Holloway's voice barking commands. Nolan's sharper panic trying to sound like control. The thudding rhythm of boots. And underneath it something else. The East Wing had gone quiet. Quiet was never empty. Quiet was where professionals lived. Erin slipped out of the closet and closed the door behind her with a careful pull. She moved down the side passage, head low, shoulders, loose feet, soft. The red emergency strips along the floor cast long shadows that made the hallway look like it was underwater. She turned into the east corridor. The broken window at the far end yawned like a wound. Rain blew in cold and wet and pooled on the floor. Glass glittered in scattered fragments. A body lay just inside the breach, a National Guard soldier, eyes open, face turned towards the ceiling, as if he had been surprised that ceilings existed. Erin's throat tightened once, then settled. She knelt beside him, fingers finding his neck. No pulse. Still warm. She closed his eyes with 2 fingers. Then she slid forward, pressing close to the wall. Outside the breach, the drainage ditch ran alongside the hospital. Storm water filled it black and fast, masking movement with sound. Footprints stamped into mud, clean edges. Not a mob. A team. Erin listened again. A faint hiss of a radio. A whisper close. 2 figures moved inside the corridor ahead, their silhouettes bulky under gear that did not look like anything issued by the guard. Their helmets were smooth, their vests thick with plates, and faint green glows pulsed from the edges of their goggles. Night vision. One of them spoke into a throat mic voice, low and steady. Clear right, no resistance. Target is in triage. Knox wants him secured in 5. The second answered burn the rest. Erin pressed her back into an alcove where a fire extinguisher hung. The wall was cold damp from the storm and it soaked some of her heat away. She slowed her breathing, let her pulse settle. The men moved past her, their goggles aimed down the corridor searching for threats in front of them, not behind. Erin did not move until the second man's boots passed her by 3 steps. Then she stepped out. No rush, no flinch, a controlled snap. Her left hand clamped over his mouth and pulled his head back, exposing the soft space beneath the helmet line. The pistol came up in her right hand. The suppressor kissed skin, a soft cough of sound. The man went slack. Erin lowered him carefully, controlling the weight so the gear did not clatter. She let him down like she was placing a patient into bed. The first man stopped ahead just a fraction. He felt the break in rhythm. He began to turn. Erin's pistol rose. Her sight picture was clean in the red glow. She fired once. The round entered beneath the rim of his helmet, a precise angle. He dropped straight down. Silence returned, thick and heavy, broken only by the rain threading through the window. Erin crouched by the bodies, moving quickly now. She pulled a grenade from one vest and a spare magazine from another. She did not take the rifles. Too long, too loud, too awkward for what she needed. She leaned close to the first man's radio. Static, then a voice rough with authority. Team 2 report. Erin watched the radio like it might bite. No answer. The voice returned sharper. Team 2, this is Knox. Status. Erin clicked the radio off. She rose, pistol up, and moved deeper toward the junction where the east corridor met the main hall. The gunfire was louder now, echoing through the prefab walls in violent pulses. As she neared the corner, a burst of automatic fire tore through the drywall ahead and showered the corridor with dust. Erin froze, pressed into shadow, and waited for the burst to end. She peered around the corner low. The lobby had become a kill zone. Overturned desks and a vending machine were makeshift cover. Holloway was behind a concrete pillar near the entrance, firing controlled bursts. 2 of his soldiers were down. One lay still near the threshold, blood pooling. Another had been dragged behind cover, clutching a shoulder wound and trying not to scream. Across the lobby, 6 armored men advanced in coordinated movement. They used cover like they had rehearsed the space. They did not spray. They pinned, they shifted, they closed. They were patient. And patience was what killed people in places like this. Erin ran the math in her head. If she stepped out and fired from the corner, she might drop one, maybe two. Then the other four would pivot and cut her down. She had no armor, no team, no time. Erin's fingers closed around the grenade in her pocket. She could not outgun them from here. She could disrupt them. She watched their spacing the rhythm of their movement. One moved left, another right, two held center, two rear. Their heads dipped and rose behind cover. Their optics glinted faintly. Erin pulled the pin. The spoon stayed under her thumb. She waited. A half second, another half. Then she rolled the grenade low across the tile toward the gap between their cover positions. The grenade clattered loud and ugly. One of the mercenaries shouted voice-sharp, "Frag." They dove. The explosion hit like a slammed door in a small room. Shrapnel tore through furniture. The red emergency strips flickered, then died, plunging the lobby into darkness. For a heartbeat, only muzzle flashes provided light, brief white stabs that froze bodies and broken frames. Erin used that heartbeat to move. She did not fire. She sprinted across the open space behind the mercenaries, keeping low, letting their attention stay on Holloway. Mud and water slicked the floor under her shoes. She felt a round crack past her, heard it slap into a wall. A mercenary yelled, "Contact rear movement." They fired into darkness where she had been bullets chewing drywall, but Erin was already gone, slipping into a side corridor. She reached the supply passage and slammed her shoulder into the closet door, punched the code by feel and slipped inside. The gunfire outside sounded far away again, but her lungs were working hard now. She braced a hand on the shelf for a second and forced her breathing down. Inhale, exhale. The pistol was hot in her hand. She holstered it and turned to the open hard case. Now, she grabbed the rifle. J-TAC. M200. The name flashed through her mind like a file label. A weapon built for distance, for open land, for wind calls and patience. But the rounds it fed were built for one thing armor could not ignore. She reached for a magazine of solid brass rounds heavy as responsibility. She seated it into the rifle with a firm push and racked the bolt. The sound was thick and mechanical loud in the small closet like a door locking. Erin lifted the rifle and felt its weight settle across her shoulders. It bit down into muscle familiar in the way scars were familiar. She stepped to the closet door and listened. Boots in the east corridor, not Holloway's men, not panicked staff, a team moving carefully. She cracked the door and looked out. 3 shapes advanced down the east corridor toward the junction she had just left, their goggles glowing faintly, rifles up, spacing tight. The lead man moved with the caution of someone who had just discovered the world could surprise him. Behind him, another man leaned close to a radio. "We found Team 2, the second man said, voice shaking despite training. "Both down, headshots, clean." Static answered. Then the commander's voice came through low and furious. "Push. Find who did it. Do not bunch up." Erin stepped out of the closet and raised the rifle. The corridor was only 50 feet long. The rifle was absurd here. The scope was tuned for distance, not this. Erin did not need the scope. She shouldered the rifle and aimed down the corridor using instinct more than optics. The lead man saw her silhouette in the dim red glow. A woman in black thermal shirt hair pulled tight, holding a rifle that looked bigger than she was. His weapon began to rise. Erin fired. The shot inside the corridor was a physical event. The muzzle blast slammed into the walls and bounced back. Dust shook loose from ceiling seams. Erin felt the recoil drive into her shoulder deep and brutal. The solid brass round hit the lead man center mass. His ceramic plate did not crack. It failed. The impact lifted him off his feet and hurled him backward into the man behind him. The 2 bodies collapsed in a tangled heap. For a fraction of a second everything was still except the ringing in Erin's ears. Then the 2 remaining mercenaries stumbled back, dragging, scrambling, their discipline cracking under shock. Erin cycled the bolt. The spent casing clanged onto the floor, bright metal against wet linoleum. She chambered another round. Her voice carried down the corridor, rough but steady. "You have 10 seconds to leave." The mercenaries did not answer. They retreated, boots slipping, radios hissing. Outside, somewhere beyond the canvas and prefab walls, Aaron heard a voice roar through the storm, amplified by fury. "Bring up the rocket. Now." Knocks. He had heard the shot. Aaron's hands stayed steady, but her mind was already moving. The rifle was powerful but slow. The corridor was narrow. If the enemy brought a rocket into this space, the walls would not matter. Aaron slung the rifle across her back and drew the pistol again. She moved through an alternate passage that cut behind the cafeteria area, stepping over overturned chairs and spilled trays, the smell of old food mixing with smoke and wet. She reached the lobby side again near Holloway's position. The mercenaries had pulled back toward the entry threshold, rattled by the grenade and the thunderclap of the rifle. They huddled behind an overturned security desk, regrouping. Aaron saw one of them setting a heavy weapon onto the desk, feeding a belt into it with practiced speed. A belt-fed machine gun. Holloway was bleeding now, a fresh streak on his thigh, another on his arm. He was down to short bursts, counting rounds like a man counting minutes. His head snapped as Aaron slid into cover beside him, low behind the same pillar. He almost raised his rifle toward her. Then he stopped, his eyes widened, brain trying to reconcile. The quiet nurse was gone. In her place was a woman moving with lethal economy, pistol up, breathing controlled. The rifle on her back looked like something pulled from a different war. Holloway's voice came out lower. "Mercer." Aaron did not look at him, focus. He stared at her anyway. "Where did you get that?" "Supply closet," Aaron said, and leaned out just enough to fire 2 suppressed shots toward the enemy cover. The rounds struck the desk, forcing heads down. It bought Holloway a second. Holloway followed her sightline. His face tightened. "They are mounting a gun." "Yes," Aaron said. "If that goes live, this lobby becomes splinters." Holloway's jaw worked. "We cannot stop it with rifles." Aaron shifted the rifle off her back. The space behind the pillar was tight. She had to angle her body, tuck her shoulder, and thread the barrel past the concrete edge without exposing her torso. "Cover me," she said. It was not a request. Holloway blinked, then did it. He leaned out, fired a hard burst toward the entry threshold, drawing fire to himself. Bullets snapped and chipped the pillar dust, spraying near Aaron's face. Aaron did not flinch. She brought the rifle up and settled it into her shoulder. At this range, the scope's field of view was too narrow, but she used it anyway, adjusting with small movements. All she could see was the receiver of the machine gun and the hands feeding the belt. Aaron breathed out and held. She did not aim for the man. She aimed for the weapon, specifically the feed mechanism. She squeezed the trigger. The blast hit the lobby like a hammer. The round slammed into the machine gun's receiver. Metal erupted in a violent bloom, springs and fragments shredding outward. The man feeding the belt screamed as shrapnel tore into his face and chest. The heavy gun collapsed into useless, twisted pieces. Aaron cycled the bolt. The casing clanged. Her ears rang, but her eyes stayed clear. Holloway stared at her, mouth slightly open. The red emergency glow carved harsh lines into his face, making him look older. He had seen this before. Not in person, not up close. In a briefing room far away, on a screen that showed a blurred photograph and a code name no one wrote down. His voice dropped into something like disbelief. Spectre. Aaron's head turned just enough that she could see him in her peripheral vision. That name does not exist. Holloway swallowed. "I knew a major in Virginia who talked about a woman who could make impossible shots in impossible weather. I thought it was a story." Aaron's tone stayed flat. Stories get people killed. Holloway's eyes flicked to the rifle, then back to her face. Recognition sharpened. "You were declared dead." Aaron's pistol came up again, covering the enemy positions. "So keep me that way." A mercenary voice shouted from the entry threshold. "Rifle is inside. Do not push the hall." Another voice, colder, answered through the storm. Then change angles. "Roof. North wall. Take the package." Aaron's spine stiffened. Holloway heard it too and leaned closer, trying to catch words through gunfire. What did he say? Aaron's eyes narrowed, scanning toward the triage wing. They are not done. Holloway's face tightened. We are barely holding. Aaron leaned out and fired a controlled pair with the pistol. The suppressor made it sound like the building itself was coughing. A mercenary ducked back behind cover. Aaron pulled back into shadow and listened, filtering sound the way she filtered vital signs. Gunfire in the lobby. Shouts, the slap of boots. And then faint but distinct under the storm's roar, a low rhythmic thumping that did not belong to rifles or thunder. Holloway's eyes lifted toward the ceiling as if he felt it in his bones. That is not vehicles. Aaron's jaw tightened. She shifted her weight, already moving her attention toward the triage bay corridor where Nolan and Stanton were still fighting for breath under red light. The thumping grew more defined, pressing through the building's thin roof like a hand testing a lid. The thumping grew steadier, a deep pulse pressing through the canvas roof like a fist testing a drum. It did not echo like thunder. It had intention. It hovered on the edge of hearing, then swelled, and the air inside the hospital seemed to vibrate with it. Major Holloway tilted his head, listening. Rainwater dripped off his jaw. His eyes tracked upward, then snapped back to the lobby. "That is rotary," he said, low. Aaron's mouth went tight. She pictured the roof over Trauma Bay 1, thin prefab panel seams already loosened by wind and age. A helicopter did not need to land to ruin a roof. It only needed to be close enough to turn everything into a storm inside a storm. "They are not coming through the front," Aaron said. Holloway's gaze cut to her. "They are already at the front. They are keeping you here," Aaron replied. Her pistol was up her eyes, scanning the entry threshold where mercenaries crouched behind cover. "They want you pinned while another team takes Stanton." Holloway's hand clenched around his rifle. "Roof." Aaron nodded once. She shifted her weight and slid out from behind the pillar. Holloway caught her sleeve for a fraction of a second. His grip was hard, instinctive. "Mercer." Aaron did not look at him. "Hold the line. You leave this position, the lobby collapses." Holloway hissed. Aaron's eyes stayed forward. "If they take him, the truce collapses." "Choose." Holloway's fingers loosened. He did not like it, but he understood the shape of the problem. Aaron moved. She stayed low, cutting behind the cafeteria corridor where the smell of spilled broth and burned coffee mixed with cordite. The floor was slick with tracked-in mud. Red emergency strips along the baseboards were the only steady light, staining her hands and cheeks the color of old wounds. As she ran, she listened for Nolan's voice, for the wet sounds of surgery and darkness, for the rhythms of panic. She did not hear Jenna. That was good. Quiet meant Jenna had obeyed. The rotors hit harder overhead. Dust began to drift from the ceiling seams in the triage corridor, fine and pale, settling on plastic curtains and metal trays like ash. Aaron rounded the last corner into Trauma Bay 1. Nolan Pierce was hunched over Special Envoy Miles Stanton headlamp beam, shaking as he worked. His gloves were soaked. His jaw was clenched so tightly a muscle jumped in his cheek. Stanton lay pale in rigid chest, rising in shallow pulls, a bag of blood hanging beside him and swaying gently with the building's vibration. Jenna was not there. 2 soldiers from Holloway's team had dragged themselves into the bay and now crouched behind a cart, rifles angled toward the doors. One had a torn ear and eyes that did not blink enough. The other pressed a hand to his side where blood leaked between fingers. Nolan looked up at Aaron, relief and fear colliding in his face. "Where is Major Holloway?" "Lobby," Aaron said. Her voice stayed steady, as if steadiness could be contagious. "Get Stanton under the reinforced frame." Nolan blinked. "What?" Aaron pointed to the doorway where thicker beams met the floor. There. Nolan's eyes flicked to the ceiling. The rotors were almost directly above them now, a low roar that made his headlamp beam tremble. "They are on the roof," Nolan breathed. The ceiling answered him with a groan. A crack split along a seam. Dust poured down. Paperwork lifted and fluttered in circles, sucked upward by the churning air. A surgical tray rattled and tipped, instruments clinking like small bells. Aaron's mouth opened, not to shout, but to measure. She tracked the sound. The helicopter was not hovering over the lobby. It was centered over the bay, right over the VIP. Nolan grabbed Stanton's shoulders. "Stanton, come on, stay with me." Stanton did not respond. His eyes fluttered once, then rolled away. Aaron stepped in, grabbed Stanton by the collar of his torn shirt, and helped Nolan drag him. Stanton was heavier than he looked, dead weight and blood loss. They hauled him into the doorway frame just as the ceiling panel split completely. A section of drywall and insulation collapsed inward with a violent cough of debris. Ropes dropped through the hole. 4 figures in black harnesses slid down with practiced speed boots, swinging weapons up lasers slicing through the dust fog in thin red lines. They were not wearing militia gear. Their equipment was clean and expensive sealed seams, mat plates, helmets with night vision mounts. One of them shouted, voice muffled by a mask, "Package in sight." He swung his weapon toward the doorway. Aaron was already moving. She had the Chaytak slung across her back, heavy and awkward, and the pistol in her hand. The dust made the air thick, and the red emergency glow turned the room into a nightmare aquarium. Aaron did not raise the pistol. She reached behind her and yanked the rifle forward. The first operator's boots hit the floor knees, bending to absorb impact. Aaron fired from the hip. The blast inside the bay was brutal. A punch of sound that made Nolan flinch, and the wounded soldier behind the cart scream in reflex. The solid brass round hit the operator in the thigh. It did not wound. It erased. The leg severed mid-thigh flesh and fabric exploding in a wet, awful bloom. The operator collapsed with a raw animal sound blood pumping bright in the red light. The other 3 swung toward Aaron instantly. Their weapons barked. Bullets snapped through the dust, striking carts and cabinets, sparks flashing as metal caught rounds. Aaron dove behind a heavy instrument cart. The rifle was too long here, too slow for follow-up. She rolled shoulder, grinding into tile, and felt the impact of rounds on the cart above her like hammer blows. Nolan shouted something, but the helicopter noise swallowed it. One operator ignored Aaron and lunged for Stanton. He grabbed the envoy by the suit jacket and hauled him toward the dangling ropes, dragging him like luggage. Nolan surged forward on instinct, hands outstretched. No. The operator backhanded Nolan with the butt of his weapon. Nolan flew sideways and hit the floor, hard headlamp beam skittering across the room like a frantic insect. Aaron's pistol came up. She fired twice. The rounds hit armor plates and did nothing but spark. The operator hauling Stanton did not even look at her. Aaron's pistol clicked, empty. For a split second the room narrowed to a single fact. The VIP was 10 feet from the ropes. In 10 seconds he was gone. Aaron's eyes snapped to Nolan, sprawled on the tile, blood at his hairline, breathing fast and shallow. His right hand was near a tray of instruments that had spilled during the ceiling collapse. Scalpels, forceps, metal shining wet. Aaron's voice cut through rotor roar, sharp and absolute. "Pierce, scalpel." Nolan blinked, dazed. Aaron's eyes locked on him. "Throw it." Nolan's gaze dropped to the tray. His fingers fumbled, then closed around a scalpel. He slid it across the blood-slick floor toward Aaron. The blade skated, spun once, and came to rest near Aaron's knee. Aaron snatched it up. It was a ridiculous weapon against men in plates, but plates always had seams. Aaron rose from behind the cart in one fast motion, fully exposed, and launched herself at the operator holding Stanton. The operator saw her coming, a middle-aged woman with a small blade, and his body language shifted into contempt. He began to raise his weapon to finish her. Aaron did not give him the distance to use it. She slapped the barrel aside with her left hand, stepping inside his guard so close she could smell the rubber of his mask and the oil on his weapon. Her right hand did not stab. It slashed, a precise, shallow cut across the exposed strip of skin above his vest line, right where the pulse lived, right where armor ended and biology began. Blood sprayed hot and bright. The operator gasped, hands flying to his neck. His grip loosened. Stanton sagged. Aaron grabbed Stanton's collar and yanked him backward into the doorway frame, dragging him into cover as the other 2 operators opened fire. Rounds shredded the air where she had been standing a heartbeat earlier. The instrument cart sparked and rang as bullets hit it. Erin pressed Stanton down with one forearm. "Stay down," she shouted at him, though she did not know if he could hear. Stanton's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and wet with pain. He stared up at Erin's face smeared with dust and blood, and something in his gaze sharpened with recognition that made Erin's skin go cold. Agent Stanton wheezed. He coughed, blood bubbling at his lips. 49. Erin's jaw tightened. She leaned closer. "Do not say that." Stanton's eyes widened, the way people's eyes widened when a ghost spoke back. "They said you were dead." Erin's voice was low, rough, and close. "I am. Stay that way." The operators adjusted professional in their cruelty. They did not rush the doorway. They split. One moved left and flipped a gurney for cover weapon trained on Erin's position. The other moved right and pulled a canister from his vest. He shouted, voice muffled, "Flash out!" The metallic glint arced through dust. Erin did not have time to throw it back. She did not have a free hand. She had a wounded VIP pressed under her arm and a dead operator bleeding out at her feet. Erin's eyes snapped to the crash cart beside her. A thick wool blanket lay folded on top, meant for shock, meant for warmth. Erin grabbed it and threw it over herself, and Stanton pressing it down like a lid just as the flashbang detonated. Light burned white behind her eyelids. Sound punched her gut. Her ears rang so hard it felt like pain had a pitch. Erin counted anyway, because counting was something she could control. 1, 2, 3. She yanked the blanket off. The operator on the right was advancing, expecting her to be stunned and curled into herself. Erin surged forward instead. She slid on her knees across the blood-slick tile coming in under his weapon's firing arc. She grabbed the barrel with her left hand. The metal was hot, searing her palm, and pain flashed bright and clean. Erin shoved the barrel upward and to the side, forcing his shots into the ceiling. With her right hand, she drove the scalpel into the gap between his vest and his armpit. Not a kill shot, a disabling cut. The blade found nerves and severed them. The operator's arm went dead instantly. He screamed, dropping the weapon. Erin did not waste a motion. She snatched the falling submachine gun out of the air, rolled onto her back, and fired a short burst toward the third operator behind the gurney. Rounds sparked off metal, forcing him to duck. Nolan's voice rose hoarse, coming from the floor where he had crawled back toward the doorway. "Erin." Erin's eyes flicked to him. His face was pale fear and adrenaline making his pupils wide. His hands were shaking. "Get Stanton out," Erin shouted. "Pharmacy, reinforced walls." Nolan hesitated. "I cannot move him. He will crash." Erin's gaze snapped back to the operator behind cover. She fired another burst controlled not to kill, but to keep him down. "Move," she barked. Nolan swallowed, then crawled to Stanton, hooking arms under his shoulders. Stanton groaned as Nolan dragged him. Erin stepped forward, MP5 up, walking backward, covering them. The helicopter still hammered overhead rotors, whipping dust into spirals, but the operators who had dropped in were broken now. One bled out on the tile. One clutched his dead arm and writhed. The last one stayed behind cover, pinned by Erin's bursts. Nolan hauled Stanton through the bay doors and into the corridor boots, slipping on wet floor. Erin followed, backing out, muzzle steady. A radio crackled from the vest of the disabled operator. A voice cut through static and rotor noise, low and furious. "Sky team suppress. I am breaching north wall. We crush them in the middle." Erin froze for a fraction of a second. North wall. The corridor behind the pharmacy. The place Nolan was dragging Stanton toward. Erin's blood went cold in a new way. Not fear. Calculation. She reached down, yanked the radio from the operator's vest, and pressed the mic. "Knox," she said. The line went quiet, as if even the static paused to listen. Then Knox's voice returned slower. "Who is this?" Erin kept her voice calm, almost conversational. "You are losing men." A pause. Knox's breath hissed, that voice. Erin's eyes flicked down the corridor, where Nolan struggled, dragging Stanton's shoulders, heaving. Erin spoke into the mic voice, hardening. "If you breach the north wall, I blow the oxygen manifold. This wing becomes a crater." Knox laughed, once short and ugly. "You bluff." Aaron's gaze stayed fixed on Nolan. "Try me." Knox's voice lowered recognition, creeping in like a cold hand. "You sound like Yemen." Aaron's grip on the mic tightened. For a split second she saw sun-baked dust and a village wall and a scope line trembling with breath. She smashed the radio against the corridor wall. Plastic cracked. The speaker died. It was a bluff, and it was not. Aaron ran. She caught up to Nolan and Stanton at the corridor junction. Nolan's headlamp beam shook wildly. Stanton groaned, pain and blood loss making his breaths small. "Pharmacy is a trap," Aaron said. Nolan stared at her eyes, wild. "It has concrete walls." "It has one exit," Aaron replied, "and the north wall behind it is thin. They breach there, you die." Nolan swallowed, voice cracking. "Then where?" Aaron turned them toward a stairwell door marked basement. "Morgue," Aaron said. Nolan's face tightened. "That is a dead end." "It is the only place in this building with walls thick enough to matter," Aaron answered. Behind them, gunfire in the lobby surged again, then shifted as Holloway's men and the mercenaries traded position. The helicopter noise began to drift, moving away from the roof hole now that its insertion failed. Aaron did not look back. She pushed the stairwell door open and guided Nolan down, one hand on the railing, the other on the MP5. Stanton sagged between them like a weight made of consequences. The stairwell smelled of damp concrete and bleach. The emergency strips along the steps cast long shadows, turning each landing into a mouth. Footsteps thudded above them, distant multiple. The enemy clearing the ground floor. Aaron heard the rhythm, the spacing. They moved like they owned time. Nolan's breathing was loud. He tried to control it and failed. "You are shaking," Aaron said quietly. Nolan's voice came out thin. "You just cut a man's throat with a scalpel. I am allowed." Aaron did not respond. She reached the basement door and shoved it open. The morgue was a concrete box cold enough that breath fogged faintly. Stainless steel drawers lined one wall, their handles gleaming. The air smelled of formaldehyde and damp earth, a smell that never belonged in a place where people fought to live. Aaron dragged a heavy gurney across the floor and shoved it against the steel door, barricading it. The metal groaned. Nolan helped, panting, then slid down the wall beside Stanton. Stanton's eyes were open now, half-focused, his face gray. He pressed a hand to his abdomen, fingers trembling. "They are not supposed to know," he whispered. "About the key." Aaron crouched beside him, checking his bleeding with hands that still knew how to be a nurse. She tightened a bandage, applied pressure, listened to his breath. "They know the route," Aaron said. "They know the cargo." Someone talked. Stanton's lips moved in a painful half-smile. "Someone always talks." Nolan sat back against a cabinet, eyes flicking from Aaron to the barricaded door. His hands were smeared with blood and dust. "How many are out there?" Aaron tilted her head, listening to vibrations through the floor. Boots above, voices muffled. "Too many," she said. Nolan let out a shaky laugh that held no humor. "That is not helpful." Aaron stood and moved to the disabled operator's vest she had dragged down with them, stripping it with quick hands. She pulled spare magazines, a grenade, a combat knife. She found a pistol in a thigh holster and held it out to Nolan. Nolan stared at it as if it were a snake. "No." Aaron's eyes locked onto his. "Take it." Nolan swallowed hard. "I took an oath." Aaron did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "That oath applies to patients." Nolan's jaw trembled. "I am a doctor." Aaron stepped closer until Nolan had to look up at her. Her face in the emergency light looked older, sharper, carved by things Nolan could not imagine. "Those men upstairs are not patients," she said. "They are a disease, and right now you are the only cure you have." Nolan's breath hitched. His gaze slid to Stanton, then back to Aaron. His fingers closed around the pistol. The metal looked wrong in his hands. His grip was clumsy. His trigger discipline wavered. Aaron adjusted his fingers without asking. "Keep it low. Finger off until you mean it." Nolan swallowed again. "Who taught you that?" Aaron turned away. "Listen." She moved to the morgue entrance and knelt, taping a trip line across the floor with surgical tape. At the end of the tape, she rigged a flashbang she had pulled from the operator's vest. A crude trap, but crude worked when it had surprise. Stanton watched, her eyes narrowed with pain and recognition. "You were scrubbed," he rasped. "Your file was gone." Aaron's hands did not pause. "I know." "We thought you turned," Stanton whispered. "Or you were liquidated." Aaron pulled the tape taut, then tied it off. Her voice dropped quieter than the morgue's hum. "I did not turn." She looked down at her own hands. They were smeared with blood dust tape residue. The same hands that had adjusted IV drips an hour ago now wired a grenade. "I stopped," Aaron said. Nolan's voice cracked. "Stopped what?" Aaron's eyes flicked up distant for a fraction of a second. Not to a future, but to a memory that sat like shrapnel under skin. "After Yemen," she said, "after the village." Stanton's throat bobbed as he swallowed. He looked away. Aaron's voice stayed even, but something underneath it shifted a faint tremor that did not belong to fear. "I could not look through a scope without seeing faces," she said. "So I came here. I wanted to save lives for a change." Nolan stared at her, stunned by the simplicity of the confession. Aaron finished the trip line and stood. "Turns out the blood does not wash off." A thud hit the ceiling above them. Then another. Dust sifted from a seam. Nolan's grip tightened on the pistol. "They are inside." Aaron nodded once. "They are clearing the ground floor." She crossed the morgue and retrieved the Chaytak, setting it on an autopsy table. The rifle looked obscene atop stainless steel, like a predator lounging in a surgical room. Nolan's eyes widened. "You brought that down here." Aaron extended the bipod leg, steadying it. "I did." "That rifle is for Miles," Nolan said, voice rising with panic. "Not this." Aaron checked the magazine. "Solid brass rounds. Heavy. Certain." "Concrete does not care about Miles," she replied. She moved to the far wall of the morgue and placed her palm against it, feeling the cold. Her eyes closed. Beyond this wall lay the boiler room. Aaron had walked these corridors in daylight when everyone else slept, learning the building like some people learned scripture. She knew which pipes fed fuel to the generator. She knew where the electrical junction box sat mounted. She knew where the floor vibrated when boots entered the basement hallway. Nolan's voice softened, almost pleading. "Aaron, what are you doing?" Aaron opened her eyes, knocking. Footsteps vibrated through the floor. Heavy boots. Multiple. A brief pause. A muffled voice came from the other side of the wall, filtered through concrete. "Stack up a man," said. The voice was calm and hard. "Knox." Aaron slid behind the rifle cheek to stock breath controlled. She did not aim at the door. She aimed through the wall at a point she saw in her mind as clearly as a map. She exhaled. She pulled the trigger. The shot inside the morgue was apocalyptic. Sound slammed off concrete and came back ringing. The recoil drove into her shoulder. A clean hole punched through the wall dust, spraying inward. On the other side, in the boiler room, the round struck the high-pressure fuel line Aaron had chosen. Fuel hissed out with violent force, vaporizing into a fine mist. Aaron cycled the bolt. The casing clanged onto the autopsy table and spun. She shifted her aim 6 inches to the right. She fired again. The second round smashed into the electrical junction box mounted where Aaron knew it would be. Sparks erupted. The diesel vapor caught instantly. A deep, dull whoomp rolled through the wall, followed by a roar like a jet engine trapped indoors. Heat punched through the bullet holes. Smoke began to seep into the morgue in thin gray tongues. From the other side of the wall came screaming. Not one scream, many. Short, raw human sounds that cut off as oxygen vanished in flame. Nolan's face drained of color. He stared at the wall, mouth open, unable to speak. Stanton closed his eyes, pain and horror blending into something quiet. Aaron stood slowly, hands steady despite the slight tremble in her fingers. "Confined space," she said, voice clinical. "Fuel vapor, it burns the air." The steel door of the morgue rattled in its frame, as if the building shuddered in disgust. A radio crackled somewhere in the smoke. Erin had a radio clipped to her belt, now scavenged from the operator. Static cleared just enough for a voice to punch through, rough and furious and close. "You burned them," Knox rasped. Erin lifted the radio to her mouth. "I told you to leave." Knox coughed, then laughed a wet sound. "I am going to peel your skin off." Erin's eyes narrowed. "You lead from the back." A pause. Knox's breathing came harsh through the speaker like he was moving. "You think you know me." Erin's voice stayed flat. "I know your type." Knox's voice rose and rage made it careless. "You are not a nurse." Erin's mouth tightened. "Not tonight." A new sound cut through the smoke and the distant gunfire. High-pitched at first, then growing into a roar that made the morgue's drawers vibrate. Jet engines. Fast movers. Nolan's head snapped upward. His eyes widened, hope and disbelief mixing. "That is air." Erin did not smile. She listened. The engine pitch matched a low pass, then a climb. The sound turned sharp and close, then swept away. Then the emergency frequency, open and crackling, carried a pilot's voice into the basement. "Liberty Ground, this is Vulture 2-1. We have eyes on hostile signatures outside the perimeter. Cleared hot. Holloway." He had fixed comms or found a line of sight. He had gotten the message out. Erin closed her eyes for a fraction of a second and let the sound settle in her bones. Not relief, not celebration, only a shift in probability. The first strike hit outside. The ground shook. Dust fell from the ceiling seams. A deep concussion rolled through the basement, followed by a distant tearing sound, like the forest itself was being ripped open. Nolan flinched and pressed his hands over his ears. Stanton winced, teeth clenched. Erin stayed standing, listening to the pattern of impacts, to the way the building responded, to the way the air changed when something large burned. A second strike hit, then a third. The noise above softened into a heavy, stunned silence, broken only by the faint hiss of sprinklers activating somewhere in the building. Water began to drip from pipes, pattering onto concrete. Knox's radio chatter died. Erin stepped to the morgue door and gripped the handle. The metal was cold and wet. She looked back at Nolan and Stanton. "Stay here," Erin said. Nolan's eyes were wide. "What about you?" Erin's voice was steady. "If he is alive, he is moving." Nolan's throat bobbed. "You said he leads from the back." Erin nodded once. "That means he survives longer than his men." She opened the morgue door. Smoke rolled in thick and bitter, carrying the smell of burned diesel and scorched insulation. The boiler room door down the hallway was blown off its hinges, twisted metal hanging like a broken jaw. The stairwell beyond it yawned upward into darkness. Erin raised the pistol and stepped out into the basement corridor, her shoes whispering through wet ash, as water dripped steadily from the ceiling. Smoke rolled low along the basement corridor, thick enough to turn the emergency strips into smeared red ribbons. Erin moved through it with the pistol raised one step at a time, letting her eyes do the work her lungs could not. The air tasted like burned diesel and melted insulation. Sprinkler water dripped from pipes and pooled in the corners, carrying ash into gray swirls that clung to her boots. The boiler room doorway was a torn mouth. Twisted metal hung from the frame. Inside, the heat had gutted the space and left it hollow. Charred shapes lay where men had been seconds earlier. Erin did not linger. She kept moving, sweeping the stairwell, listening for breath that did not belong to her. She heard something. Not footsteps, not the creak of gear. A cough, wet and furious, coming from above. Erin eased toward the stairwell, shoulders loose, pistol steady. The steps were slick with water and soot. She climbed slowly, keeping close to the wall. The smell grew cleaner as she rose, trading diesel for wet concrete and the faint chemical bite of antiseptic that still lived in the building's bones. Halfway up, she stopped. A shadow shifted at the landing. Erin froze, muzzle aligned with the darkness. Then a voice rasped from the smoke. "You are hard to kill." Knox's tone was thin, strained, but it held the same arrogance. Erin saw him now, leaning against the stairwell wall, one hand pressed to his ribs. His gear was scorched at the edges. His mask hung loose around his neck. His eyes were bright with pain and hate. He held a pistol low, not yet raised. Aaron did not move closer. "You should have left." Knox's mouth curled. "You used a hospital to burn my men." Aaron's eyes stayed on his hands. "You brought a war into it." Knox pushed off the wall, wobbling, then catching himself. "You do not belong in scrubs." "I do not belong anywhere," Aaron said. Knox laughed, then coughed hard, doubling slightly. When he straightened, his face was wet with sweat and soot. "Spectre," he said, savoring it like poison. "They always told stories. I never believed them until tonight." Aaron's finger rested outside the trigger guard. Her breathing was steady. "Your stories got people killed." Knox's pistol lifted a fraction. Aaron's muzzle lifted with it, matching his movement without hurry. He stared at her, calculating. "If I walk out of here," he said, voice rough, "I get paid. If I drag the envoy out, I get paid more." Aaron's eyes narrowed. "You are not dragging anyone. You have no team left." Knox's gaze flicked past Aaron up toward the upper floors. Distantly, the building groaned. A muffled shout echoed somewhere, then died. Water continued to drip steady and indifferent. Knox's lips parted. "You think the jets ended it?" Aaron did not answer because Knox did not need her answer. He was listening too. He was trying to hear whether anyone was left outside. His shoulders sagged slightly as the silence confirmed what he already knew. He took a step down. Another, then he stopped, eyes locked on Aaron. "You are going to shoot me here," he said. "In a stairwell, like an execution." Aaron's voice stayed flat. "You came here to execute everyone." Knox's grin flashed quick and ugly. "You did not deny it." Aaron did not flinch. "Drop it." Knox lifted the pistol instead. Aaron fired once. The suppressor made it sound small, but the impact was not. Knox jerked, stumbled back into the wall, and slid down, leaving a smear of dark on the concrete. His pistol clattered down the steps and stopped at Aaron's boot. Knox's eyes stayed open. His mouth worked as if he wanted to speak. No sound came. His head tilted and went still. Aaron held her aim for a beat longer, then lowered the pistol. Her ears rang with silence rather than sound. She bent, picked up Knox's pistol with 2 fingers, checked it out of habit, then set it aside. She did not take trophies. She did not take anything that made the past heavier. She stepped over him and continued upward. On the ground floor, the lobby looked like an abandoned set after a storm scene. Overturned desks, splintered chairs, glass scattered across tile, blood drying in black patches where the sprinklers had not reached. The red emergency strips had returned, but weak pulsing as if they were tired too. A few of Holloway's soldiers remained moving like ghosts through smoke. One sat against the wall with a bandage wrapped around his head, eyes unfocused. Another leaned over a wounded mercenary rifle, pointed down, not shooting, just watching. Their faces held the stunned emptiness that came after you survived something you were not supposed to. Holloway was near the entrance, sitting on the floor with his back to a pillar. A thick bandage wrapped his thigh. His arm was tied in a makeshift sling. His rifle lay across his lap barrel, aimed at nothing. He looked up when Aaron stepped into the lobby. For a second, his expression was unreadable. Then something eased in his eyes, not relief exactly, more like confirmation. "You got him," Holloway said. Aaron nodded once. Basement stairwell. Holloway exhaled slowly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a cigarette that looked crushed and damp, then worked it between his fingers until it was smokable. He lit it with a shaking hand, shielded the flame from drafts, and took a drag like he needed it to remind him he was still made of flesh. He offered it to Aaron without speaking. Aaron hesitated, then took it. Her fingers left a faint smear of soot on the paper. She inhaled. The smoke stung her lungs sharp and grounding. It tasted like bad choices and morning after. Outside the shattered entrance, the sky had begun to lighten. The storm had loosened its grip. Rain fell softer now, more like a warning than an assault. Beyond the perimeter, the forest was washed clean, dark trees dripping quietly. Holloway watched Aaron over the cigarette ember. Pierce. Aaron's gaze shifted toward the corridor leading to triage. Alive. The envoy. Alive, Aaron repeated. Basement, with Pierce. Holloway nodded, then grimaced as he adjusted his leg. Pain crossed his face and vanished under discipline. Jets hit hard, he said. They ran. Aaron did not answer. She was listening to the building, to the new sounds of arrival. She heard it now, distant but growing. Helicopters. Not the enemy's low thump, but the steadier approach of rescue birds. Holloway heard them too. His eyes flicked toward the window. Debrief team will be on the first bird, he said. People who ask questions for a living. Aaron stared at the doorway and the pale gray light beyond it. And they will recognize me. Holloway's mouth tightened. If they do, you will not walk away from it. Aaron did not look at him, but her voice softened a fraction. They will not hand me a medal. Holloway shook his head once. They will call you a liability. The word landed with weight. Liability, not hero, not survivor. A problem to be contained. Aaron took another drag of the cigarette and let the smoke out slowly. I cannot go back. Holloway watched her for a beat. His eyes were tired in a way that had nothing to do with his wounds. I have to write a report, he said. Aaron's gaze shifted to him sharp. A report. Chaos, Holloway continued, voice even. Confusion, power loss, fire, personnel missing. We were pinned. We took casualties. You disappeared. Aaron's expression did not change, but something in her posture eased and tightened at the same time. Holloway nodded toward the entrance. South fence is open. There is a dirt bike near the tree line. One of the locals left it when the shooting started. I saw it when we repositioned. Aaron held his gaze now. You are offering me an exit. Holloway's jaw flexed. I'm offering myself a way to sleep. Aaron's eyes stayed on his face. You could arrest me. Holloway snorted, then winced and shifted. I could barely stand an hour ago. That is not what I meant, Aaron said. Holloway took the cigarette back, dragged once, and looked down at the ember like it held answers. You saved my men, he said. You saved Pierce. You saved the envoy. You saved this place. Aaron's voice was quiet. I also burned men alive. Holloway did not look up. They came here to burn everyone. Aaron's throat tightened, but she did not let it show. She handed the cigarette back. Holloway took it and held it between them, a small, shared fire. The helicopters grew louder. The building's remaining lights flickered as power tried to return, then steadied into a dim hum. Somewhere down the hall, a medic shouted for more gauze. A wounded man groaned. The hospital had started to become a hospital again, even surrounded by wreckage. Aaron stood. Her legs felt heavy now that adrenaline had let go. She flexed her burned palm, once pain flaring, then fading into the background where pain always went when survival demanded space. Holloway watched her rise. If you walk out, he said, they will look for you. Aaron's eyes shifted to the forest beyond the doorway, dark and waiting. They will look anyway. Holloway's voice lowered. If you step onto that bird, Mercer stops existing. Aaron's mouth tightened. Mercer already does not exist. Holloway looked at her, and in his eyes, Aaron saw the weight of protocol pushing against a smaller, stubborn thing that was not written in any manual. He nodded once, almost imperceptible. Go, he said. Aaron paused, then reached down and squeezed his hand. It was brief, hard, the kind of grip soldiers used when words were a luxury. Thank you, she said. Holloway's fingers tightened back, then released. Do not make me regret it. Aaron turned toward the corridor, not toward the debrief birds, not toward the medics moving in with stretchers and equipment. She moved toward the other side of the building, toward the section of fence that had been blown open and now sagged like a broken jaw. She passed through the lobby and into the inner corridor. The triage bay was a ruin. The roof hole gaped overhead, showing a slice of gray sky. Paperwork lay plastered to the floor by sprinkler water. A surgical lamp dangled bent. Blood was everywhere, diluted now into pink streaks that ran toward the floor drains. Nolan was there, kneeling beside a stretcher, hands still pressed to Stanton's abdomen. His headlamp was crooked beam pointing at the floor. His face was pale and streaked with soot. When he looked up and saw Aaron, something in his expression cracked. "Aaron," he said hoarsely. Stanton lay on the stretcher, eyes half open, breathing shallow but steady. The bandage across his abdomen was thick and red, but it held. Nolan swallowed hard. "They are coming," he said, voice shaking. "Rescue, federal, everybody." Aaron nodded. "Good." Nolan's eyes searched her face like he was trying to find the nurse again. "What are you?" Aaron looked down at Stanton and checked his breathing, her fingers returning to familiar work with ease. "Tonight I am the reason you are alive," she said. Nolan's jaw trembled. "That is not an answer." Aaron's eyes lifted. "It is enough." Stanton's lips moved. His voice was a rasp. "Agent 49, he whispered. Aaron's hand snapped lightly against his chest, not hard, just a firm pressure. "No names," she said. Stanton's eyes sharpened with understanding and something like gratitude. "They will not stop," he whispered. Aaron's voice stayed calm. "They stopped tonight." Nolan stared at her hands, at the steadiness, at the way Aaron moved between violence and care, without pausing to explain herself. "You could stay," he said, suddenly desperate. "You could tell them what you did. They would have to understand." Aaron's gaze held his for a long beat. "You believe that," she said. Nolan opened his mouth, then closed it. His shoulders sagged. He looked older than he had 2 hours ago. Aaron reached into a supply bin and pulled out a clean roll of gauze. She set it beside Nolan's knee. "Keep pressure," she said. "Do not let him get cold." Nolan nodded, eyes wet, but refusing tears. "I will." From the corridor beyond, voices rose. Boots. The clatter of equipment. The first responders had entered the building. Aaron stepped back, letting Nolan's body block her from the doorway for a moment. "Listen," she said to him low. Nolan's eyes lifted. Aaron's voice stayed flat, but there was a softness in it that did not belong to orders. "You did not freeze," she said. "That matters." Nolan's throat bobbed. "I froze 100 times." "You moved anyway," Aaron replied. Nolan's fingers tightened on the gauze. "Where will you go?" Aaron did not answer. She did not owe him a map. She did not owe anyone a future. She turned and slipped out the side exit that led toward the utility corridor and the rear fence line. Smoke, thinned here, replaced by wet air and the smell of pine. A medic passed by, pushing a stretcher, eyes too busy to register Aaron's face. Aaron kept her head down and moved with purpose, not haste. Haste drew attention. Purpose blended. She reached the rear door and pushed it open. Cold air hit her face clean and sharp. Outside, dawn spread thin light across the clearing. The storm clouds were breaking, revealing bruised purple along the horizon. The floodlights still burned, but they looked weak against morning. The perimeter fence on the south side sagged where explosions had torn it open. Mud lay churned with boot prints, tire tracks, and dark stains that rain had not washed away. In the courtyard, bodies lay under tarps. Others lay uncovered, faces turned into mud. Aaron moved past them without looking. She crossed the clearing, staying close to the shadows of supply sheds and vehicles, using the clutter as cover. The rescue helicopter's rotors thundered overhead now, descending on the front side of the compound. Voices shouted. Medics ran. The attention was elsewhere. Near the tree line, half hidden by brush, a dirt bike sat on its kickstand, spattered with mud. The handlebars were turned slightly, as if someone had abandoned it mid-thought. Aaron walked to it and ran her hand over the seat, feeling the wet leather. She checked the fuel cap. She checked the ignition. A key hung from the switch, bouncing faintly in the breeze. A gift or a mistake. Aaron swung her leg over the bike and settled onto the seat. For a moment, she did not start it. She listened to the helicopters, to the voices, to the building behind her where Nolan fought to keep Stanton alive, and Holloway fought to keep the truth buried under paperwork. Aaron looked back once. Field Hospital Liberty was a broken shape against dawn canvas, torn windows, shattered smoke rising in thin strands. It looked like a place that had tried to be a sanctuary and been punished for it. Erin's chest tightened, then steadied. She turned forward, gripped the handlebars, and started the bike. The engine coughed, then caught its sound small against the thunder of rotors. Erin eased the clutch and rolled forward into the tree line. Branches brushed her shoulders. Mud sprayed under the tires. Within seconds, the forest swallowed her. Back at the front of the compound, Stanton was lifted onto a stretcher by medics in clean gear. He turned his head eyes, scanning past faces, searching for one. "Where is she?" he rasped. Major Holloway limped toward him, face-blank posture rigid. He stopped beside the stretcher as if he belonged there and spoke with the calm of a man who had already chosen his story. "I'm sorry," Sir Holloway said. "We did not find her." Stanton's eyes narrowed. He stared past Holloway toward the fog that clung to the forest edge. He saw the faint line of a fresh track in the mud, thin and straight, leading away from the compound. He understood without being told. Stanton's lips pressed together. "A tragedy," he murmured. Holloway's gaze stayed fixed on the tree line. "Yes, sir." Stanton's eyes closed briefly, then opened again. "She saved us." Holloway's voice did not change. "She did her job." Stanton looked at him, pain and comprehension in his face. "No," he whispered. "She did more." Holloway did not argue. He only stepped back as medics pushed the stretcher toward the helicopter. The rotors rose. The bird lifted and banked away, carrying Stanton toward hospitals with real walls and questions with real teeth. Holloway stood in the mud, cigarette gone, hands empty, and watched the forest until the fog swallowed the last hint of movement. In the woods, Aaron rode deeper between wet trunks, following no road, only instinct and the faint pull of distance. The air smelled of pine sap and rain and soil. The noise of the compound faded until it became nothing but memory. Aaron did not look back again.